Welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. This podcast is a production of Elevate, an online learning platform for fundraising event professionals. We're coming to you today from the studios of the AV department. Please welcome our hosts, Kristen Steele and Samantha Swaim.
Well, hello and welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. We're excited to have a special guest that is a long time coming. We've been planning to have Birgit on the show for a while, and a snowstorm got in our way. So we're very excited. Thank you for your patience, Birgit, as we got to today. There's a little sort of introduction that I want to do to today's conversation, because we just wrapped up about a month ago the Elevate conference. And one of the things that we heard from a lot of folks at that conference was that they're surprised to discover that they're not the only ones who fell into the world of fundraising, that their career path, it may be more similar than they thought. And so we have been taking kind of a big picture look for the past couple of episodes about just the state of the nonprofit, what we're seeing in technology shifts, what we're seeing in organizational shifts, fundraising shifts. And today we want to talk about the career path and what we're seeing for those who are fundraisers and what that world looks like for a development professional to be looking at their future and a career in this work. So we've invited the expert who works with so many individuals across the country to talk to us a little bit about, those accidental fundraisers may not be the exception. So Birgit, thank you for joining us today. We're so glad to have you here.
Glad to be here with you. Thank you.
Kristen, let's do a formal introduction so everyone knows all of Birgit's many accomplishments.
Let's do it.
I know, there's many.
Today, we're joined by Birgit Smith Burton, a visionary leader and powerhouse in the fundraising world. Originally from Germany and raised in Buffalo, New York, Birgit's career has spanned over 2 decades, leaving a lasting impact on organizations like the UNCF, Georgia Tech, and the African American Development Officers Network, which she founded. She's also made history as the first Black woman to serve as global board chair of the Association of Fundraising Professionals. Beyond her professional achievements, Birgit's dedication to mentorship, community causes, and advancing women of color in fundraising through the RISE Fund makes her an inspiring figure in philanthropy. We're excited to dive into her journey and hear her advice for fundraisers today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
You call yourself an accidental fundraiser, and I think that matches a lot of folks we know in this profession. Could you talk to us a little bit about your journey into fundraising?
Yes. And as I get started, little disclaimer here. I am a talker. I can go off subject. I can go down rabbit holes. My team, when I was at Georgia Tech, got me one of those hourglasses with the sand in it. And the one they got was 3 minutes. And so whenever I would start going off subject, they would pull it out, turn it over, and I had 3 minutes to go off subject or, and shut it down. So I made notes for myself so that I didn't find myself way over somewhere and you had to bring me back. So if you see me looking, I'm just looking at some, bullet points, notes, because I wanted to make sure that I covered what you were asking. Okay?
Amazing.
So, the whole accidental fundraiser thing, I think that if you ask me this question again, probably in 6 to 9 months, you might get a different answer.
Okay.
I'm going to give you the answer I know now, but I'm starting to move towards, in my speaking engagements, really talking about how accidental is it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we sort of talk about it and you envision this person, just like walking down the street and they like trip and fall in this big hole that says fundraiser. And they're like, oh my God, what happened here? So, I think we all have kind of a journey that has taken us to this place where we really feel that we connect.
Yeah.
This is the thing. So I originally planned a career in the theater. Probably no surprise there, right? I found a way to still keep that going. But I changed my major to media communications for a number of reasons. And that's another story for another day. But I decided to go into media communications. I was going to change to broadcast journalism. And while I was interning at an ad agency, I got involved with a nonprofit organization that hosted a celebrity golf tournament. And so I really, got involved with that and found that I enjoyed planning the event, working with the volunteers, and ultimately raising money for a good cause. So I reached out to that nonprofit after the golf tournament, and I said, you know what, I can raise money for this organization. You're really not doing a lot, in Buffalo. And they believed me, and they were also, it was the United Negro College Fund. And at the time they were hiring, novice fundraisers, or those who had no fundraising, training, knowledge, experience. And that's where I cut my fundraising teeth. So I was able to tap into, after, leaving the State University of New York at Fredonia, majoring in musical theater. I ended up kind of, moving that towards a career in fundraising, and then found other ways to kind of, be theatrical.
Birgit, I have a similar journey. I actually come from a similar background. I've always said, if you want it done, hire a theater kid. Like there's a lot of ingenuity in the theater world.
True.
Yes.
I also sort of came from a theater studies background, changed to communication studies, and then discovered that raising money for a good cause was something that filled the bucket and filled my heart. So I landed myself in this journey. With sort of that being the initial step of your path, how has that now informed all of this amazing work that was in your bio? You work with, not just work with, you're the founder of AADO, the Rise Fund, and you're the chairman of the AFP, which, what an amazing, huge job, and important right now. So talk to us a little bit about how those early days have kind of shaped your career path.
So thank you for that. So as a self-proclaimed accidental fundraiser, my work with the African American Development Officers Network, AFP, Association of Fundraising Professionals, and the Rise Fund, which, by the way, it was established in my honor, but I didn't establish it. So a group of women representing 4 other organizations came together, and they decided to create the Rise Fund in my honor, to provide scholarships. Each year they award 4 women in the amount of $2,000 that they can use for anything on their professional fundraising career journey. Right. So, I've heard wonderful stories about how they've used the money to finish a master's degree, to attend conferences that weren't in the budget, just wonderful things that they've been able to use it for. But I recognize the challenges, that professionals of color were facing, because I am one. And so the barriers to access, to fundraising, training, jobs, mentorship opportunities, the lack of representation in leadership roles.
Yep.
And so I found a space in each one of these organizations where that was addressed. Nobody did it perfectly, which was one of the reasons why I founded the African American Development Officers Network on my own, because after spending 11 years working for the United Negro College Fund, which was predominantly a Black organization, I got a job at Georgia Tech, and I was the first frontline fundraiser of color that Georgia Tech had ever hired. And so I was looking for my community, that, when I walked in the room, the first thing that, you would see is not my color. I could walk in a room and be comfortable because everybody else, looked like me. So that was one of the main reasons for, establishing AADO. But, for those struggling to find their footing, my piece of advice is to lean into a community where, you feel that support, and that community, because the work that we do in fundraising is not meant to be done in isolation.
Yeah.
So if you're feeling, isolated and unsupported, then you're in the wrong place, or you don't have the community that you need to support you. And so and I also advise people to give yourself grace. We're so hard on ourselves, when we pause and we think, take those moments to reflect. Sometimes, we expect that that we're not doing enough. Not that we're not getting the support, but it must be something that we're not doing, and so we tend to be hard on ourselves. So I encourage people to reach out, look for those mentors, look for that support, and create your own board of directors. I'm sure you've heard that before.
Yeah.
My board of directors changes every few years. I need different kinds of support. And those are the people that I reach out to. The one who will tell me, no, don't dress like that. The one, so somebody's going to be honest, right? Yeah, I saw that picture on, social media, and don't wear that dress again, just telling you. And, or we'll make those connections for you, make those introductions for you. And the last thing I'll say is to remember that you belong here. And that's hard when you don't feel supported. But if you tell yourself when you get up, I belong here, no matter what anyone says, no matter how someone might treat me, I've earned the right to be here. And you don't have to apologize for that.
Birgit, I don't want to gloss over AADO, because I suspect we have a lot of folks who don't know what the organization is or even how to participate. Can you just give kind of for folks who are hearing about AADO or the Rise Fund, but hearing about this work for the first time, when you say lean into community, you have an incredible community. How do people participate and join and engage with you all?
So, so the interesting thing was when I was working at Georgia Institute of Technology in Atlanta, and I started my career there, because it ended up being 25 years. I came in as an associate director, and again, I walked into a room with the development team at the time was probably maybe about 80 people.
Wow,
and I
that's
would
a big
say
team.
that is a big team, and I recognize that now, especially as I, engage with, teams of one, when you say, but there are others that are 200, 300, and 400, at the Harvards and Berkeleys, and, a little side story, I was doing some benchmarking, and I was at Berkeley, and I said, how many people do you have on your development team? And folks around the conference table started looking around. I don't know. How many do we? Did somebody, I was like, you gotta think.
That many.
Like, how many do we have? That many. So I saw people of color in the room, but they were administrative staff. Nobody was a frontline fundraiser. And so I reached out to my counterparts at what's called the Atlanta University Center, which is where the HBCUs are in Atlanta. So Morehouse, Spelman, Clark Atlanta, Morris Brown at the time. They were the schools that I supported in my role with the United Negro College Fund. So I knew some of the people there, and I invited them to get together for a breakfast. Selfishly, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I was not trying to create this thing that you see now, right? I selfishly wanted to get together with some folks so that I could, commiserate or, share best practices. And there were about 25 of us, and we had such an amazing time. We said, let's do it again. But we decided to build it around a conference. So we actually would have workshop sessions and speakers. And so we did that. And so it's grown since 1998, 99, when I started it, to nearly 4,000 members around the country and in Canada. And we have an annual conference in Atlanta this year. It's in September 15th through the 17th. And you can find out about it by going to AADO, www.aadoconference.com, and everything you want to know about the conference. But throughout the 25 years, we've had mentoring programs, and we've done what we call the AADO Next in different cities, panel discussions, different programs. We had one thing called the Development Assistance Project, where we partnered with organizations and provided some, free consulting. So we've had 25 years of work, and so if anybody wants to know more about, and we have ally members. So not everybody, is a person of color. We have members who are allies who support, and provide, resources and love.
I love that.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, I'm thinking about all of the changes we're seeing right now. I mean, I think we were already sort of coming through the pandemic. We were seeing a lot of people leave the sector. We're seeing a lot of new people in the sector. Some of them accidental, some of them not. Yeah. Right. And I'm thinking about community and that being able to impact all of that change and give people a resource when in their own organizations, there may not feel like there is that resource around them because everybody's got their hair on fire. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about this community in that way and sort of what opportunities there are and what that can mean for folks to have that place during these times.
You asked that question and honestly, and I bring together, excuse me, groups of people to have discussions, right? Yep. So that we can kind of, not publicly, but kind of, let's get a group together, 5, 6, 7 of us, and let's talk. What are you hearing? And that's the question I get. I just got asked that earlier today by someone that said, what are you hearing? What are nonprofits saying? And then what are you hearing the foundation saying? Because there is this fear that they're, kind of sitting back waiting.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of waiting right now.
There's a lot of waiting right now, right? So I don't want to speak for them, but I'm going to tell you one of the biggest things that happens to me on almost a daily basis is I get the email, I get the LinkedIn message, I get the phone call to our phone line, and I'm getting help. I don't know what to do. We've lost this, government funding, on this particular program. We're trying to figure out on this program how to change the description of it. We're trying to figure out how to change the name, and they're talking to the African American Development Officers Network, right? Like, we're not going to change our name. We're going to stay, AADO. But I hear the concern, the desperation, the fear. And, I never want to be that person that puts my hands on my hips and says, I told you. But I've been preaching for a long time that you can't put all of your hopes and dreams in one bucket or, maybe not even one bucket, but having a bucket that's really dependent on certain funding, right? And that's not just government, that's even foundations. I'm always surprised at the number of organizations that are writing proposals to get grants. And when you look at the pie, the chair of charitable gifts that come in, it's like 17% come from private foundations. Yeah. A huge percentage, around 80% come from individuals, yet so many organizations depend on that government grant that they've gotten or that foundation grant that they've gotten, over the years. So the number one thing that I do is, like you said, hair's on fire and folks are running around. Take a deep breath, just really take a deep breath, calm down. It's not going to be over in 2 seconds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Your organization, the doors aren't going to close tomorrow because you didn't get that one, government grant that you've been getting for so long. But to sit down and really think and work with your board, work with your staff, and identify what are those sources of funding that we haven't been tapping into. What type of a campaign can we really focus on that will tap into individual, donors? We spend too much time worrying about what we're seeing going on over here, staring at the television, being impacted by, everything we hear every day, and taking our attention away from the true mission of our organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's like the number one thing that I tell people, sit down, start thinking of a plan, look for other sources of resources. And I really feel the foundations exist to fund. People want to support these nonprofit organizations. So I think that, you maintain a level of, we're going to keep pressing forward. We're going to keep doing this work, and we're not going to, fall apart because, this change, there's always going to be change, right?
Yeah.
And so I know that I sound like, okay, come on, Birgit, like that's, like too much, kumbaya, and that's not the, the reality. But I really believe that it is the reality. I've seen change over the years so many times, and organizations can bounce back.
Yeah.
Well, and I think what's so amazing about you saying that now and you saying that in general is it affords people that sort of sage, calm voice outside of the mayhem to be able to have that. And I think
just kept thinking, I'm so glad she's picking up the phone.
Yes. Thank you for picking up the phone, because I do think that, that chaos begets more chaos.
Yes.
When you can have that outside perspective to be like, okay, we're going to take a breath and we're going to pick an action.
Yeah.
And that's the angle we're going to work.
Right. Yeah.
Well, when we come back, we want to dive a little bit more into sort of what the sector looks like, work looks like these days, how people can keep building community around that. But we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back with Birgit Smith Burton.
Ready to take your fundraising to the next level? Need to get unstuck in your event planning? Now's your chance to connect directly with the experts behind the Fundraising Elevator. Book a one-on-one consulting session with Sam for strategic planning and fundraising strategy, with Kristen for your program and storytelling, or Mary for your registration and data tools. They're here to provide you personalized answers to all your event questions. Don't wait. Raise more at your next fundraising event. Book your session today at elevatenonprofit.com. You can also find the link in the show notes.
All right, we're back with Birgit Smith Burton, who's been talking to us a little bit about the landscape of working in the fundraising sector right now. I want to talk about remote and hybrid work, because so much changed during the pandemic, and we see so many organizations hiring folks remotely right now. How do you think that's changing fundraising?
So I'm sorry that I'm laughing about that, because, oh my gosh, that's like the beast, right? So AADO posts jobs on our website, and it is just amazing to see. I remember, right around the time of the pandemic, we would have our jobs, and then we had to create, we didn't even have a remote or hybrid section.
Right. Yeah. It wasn't a thing.
It wasn't a thing. And so the person who does the postings, said, oh, we got 2 jobs that came in this week that, are hybrid. I'm like, oh, okay, well, why don't we just create a section instead of, kind of blending that in, with all the other jobs? Let's create that category.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it, went from like a few, and now it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's taken over, and somebody characterized it once as, and I'm sure you heard this before, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
It's like, it's out. It's out.
Uh-huh.
And listen, I have seen people negotiate jobs, excuse me, where they've said, I was helping to hire someone. She was in California. We had already, made it clear that she would be expected to be in the office 3 days a week, 2 days remote. And then she suddenly said, I don't want to move. And the job was on the East Coast and she was on the West Coast. She's like, no, I don't want to move. And we're like, oh, okay. So you're going to do the whole job from California and there's going to be staff in. She said, well, then I'm not your person. And she was the perfect person. I mean,
right.
we really, we're losing that. So, there are those challenges. But one of the things that I have really recognized, especially when I was working at Georgia Tech, that working with the alumni, we really were able to connect more with the alumni by being remote.
Yeah.
And that was a whole different thing. It really sort of opened up the opportunity to really communicate with people. Our president at the time did I think it was a weekly thing. I didn't work directly with the alumni, but, I knew what was going on. And, he did something with his wife, like lemonade on the porch, with the president. And they had the camera and, he could see everybody on screen and they could see him and the breeze on a nice Georgia evening. And it was great. There were people that, had never had the opportunity to, and probably wouldn't, to engage with the president because they, might have been a little older, and couldn't travel. But I'm not making fun, but there were other challenges, okay, I'm be a little humorous. There would be, that Mr. So-and-so, who's now 92, who graduated, a long time ago. And he's like, well, I can't see. Where's the,
Yeah.
so you'd have the technology, that, were humorous. So we were always trying to help them. But, so those traditional, in-person events kind of open the borders, better donor engagement and communication. But then there were also the challenges of in-person events that really allowed for people to engage personally.
Yeah.
And that's events and staffing, communication, missing those, opportunities to be in person. And, we come into a Zoom call and, it might be an 11 a.m. call and people are popping in at 11 a.m.
Yeah.
What I mean? Whereas when you had that meeting in the office, you were coming in, you had your coffee in the hand, you chatted for a few moments, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Put your papers down and you could socialize. More. I'm hearing organizations saying we're going back to 100%, in the office. I don't think that's going to be successful.
No. The tube.
I think it's too late.
Yeah, that toothpaste is out of the tube.
It is. It's not going back in.
We've seen some development professionals who have done some really interesting things too with just, to your point, the Zoom, like president on the porch type conversations where they're having donor calls that are a once a month webinar. They're expanding into podcasts as a way to touch base with their donors. So it's interesting. I actually was talking to a fundraising professional just the other day and she said to me, I've noticed that my donors don't want to have coffee anymore and I cannot get a meeting with them. What are your donors doing? How are you connecting to donors? And I was like, text message, like meeting people where they're at. And it's changed so much. The toothpaste is out of the tube.
Well, and not only sort of how people work, right? Whether it's hybrid or remote work, but also how that's influenced our lives in a 360-degree way.
Yeah.
That being able to meet donors where they're at becomes imperative in how we do this work as well.
Yeah, it's true.
I have this cute little list that I found, the reasons people prefer to work from home. So topping the list, of course, is the money saved, by ditching the commute, right?
Yeah.
But 50% said that they don't have to worry about their appearance as much, right? And I have to be honest, I'm like many people, you might see lovely on top, but you don't want to know what's on the bottom. And it's hysterical because I will be busy and, I have my reminder come on 10 minutes before a meeting if I haven't had to be in meetings all day. And my reminder tells me it's time to do hair and makeup, so get the little, so I can, depending on who it is, because some of my staff, I'm like, my team, I'm like, it is what it is. I can clean up. And then there's two more. 31% say they can squeeze in a nap or exercise during the day.
Yeah.
That moment. And then I love this one. More than 25% prefer to work from home so they can look after who?
The dog.
Pet, yeah.
No, we think that it's because they don't have to get the babysitter or take the kids to daycare as much or whatever. No, these people and their animals are actually, when they go back to work, are like going through depression.
Yeah.
Because they're not there as much anymore. My cat will jump up on the back of my seat, and stare into the camera. My granddaughter, I have two of them, but the one that's 8, now she's fine. But a couple of years ago, we were all in Michigan. I have a house in Michigan, my son and his wife and 2 granddaughters. And Zoe would come in and, she'd say, "Can I say hi to the Zoom people?" I go, "Everybody, this is Zoe."
We've all either adjusted our boundaries or are in need of finding some. I think that's part of what the navigation is.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm always on a call, and somebody goes, "I'm sorry, the leaf blower is here today."
Yes. Yes.
They don't care. They're out there.
No. All the things that happen at home we weren't aware of before.
Right. They were happening without us.
I'm wondering, we've been talking about organizations like AADO and AFP from a sort of almost immediate crisis community standpoint. I'm wondering if you can speak to them a little bit more long-term in terms of career development and how those associations might be beneficial for folks over time.
Yeah. One of the things that I like to say, okay, so, AADO, we're not replacing AFP, right? There are things that AFP provides, and I get mixed up on a daily basis. AADO, AFP, I'm close to the CEO and members of AHP, Association for Healthcare. So, sometimes, matter of fact, I'm just saying, I sent an email out to people who are on an insiders list for the conference for AADO, and I put CEO of AFP.
Oh,
And I didn't even notice that until my assistant, called me up and she said, "I don't think you're the CEO of AFP." And I said, "Of course I'm not." She said, "But that's what you put in the email." But anyway, so so AADO, and we don't charge for membership. We're moving to a AADO Plus. Not moving, we're adding AADO Plus. But our general membership will still be free. So we never want people to not be able to be a part of it,
Right.
because
That's amazing.
of resources. And that's because that's what, we exist for. But so it's more of a mentoring, supportive, there's educational opportunities, but we will point towards AFP, AHP case. We don't need to duplicate, that work.
Yeah.
They do it better. And they will point to us, although all of those organizations have affinity groups and, care about their members who, identify in many different ways, in supporting them. But, creating a culture, climate of, belonging is what everyone strives to do. But I feel like we do it best at AADO because that's what we were, established for. Looking at the future, as we're moving forward, I will tell you honestly, and nobody, I'm not the chair anymore, so you won't fire me. But somebody said to me, "Is AFP going to still be relevant in 5 years?"
Yeah,
and I hope that it is. But what I do hope, and we have a new CEO. His name is Art Taylor. He's the first African-American CEO ever of AFP in 63 years. And he has great vision for the organization and great plans. Excuse me. But one of the things that I say is that, and I might have said this before, you may have heard me say this before, but I'll say it again. In the US alone, the IRS, identifies between 1.5 and 1.8 million nonprofit organizations that are registered with the IRS. Okay. And so let's just take 1.5 million. And let's say that and we know that includes churches and, schools and many different types of organizations. But let's just, for kicks and giggles, say 1.5 million. And let's say that each one of those has a fundraiser, one fundraiser.
Right.
And we know that some have many more, and we know some have none.
Right. Yeah.
They don't have one dedicated fundraiser. Fundraising is being handled by, the executive director or the board. But let's just say there's one. That means there's 1.5 million professional fundraisers in the US alone. We're not even, talking about Canada. And AFP has a membership of about 27,000. A few years ago, before the pandemic, we were up to like 32,000. Still, now I worked at Georgia Tech. I don't have a Georgia Tech degree, but I can still do the math. And the math tells me that that's a pretty small percentage.
Yeah.
27,000 of 1.5. So are we serving the profession? Are we serving fundraisers in the sector? And what is it that they need? And so that's what we really need to pay closer attention to. I know that Art has plans, that's his focus. So, we are, and as things change, as the executive orders are coming down that are making changes.
Yeah.
We're really kind of having to, to once again, build this plane while we're flying it.
Yeah. Once again.
What is it? So I don't have the ultimate answer, but I do know that we need to do a better job of supporting those who are on the ground doing the work, that are the connections with those nonprofit organizations that are meeting the needs of people, at the end of the day.
Yeah. I'm glad you bring up the 1.5 million of just like how big of a sector it is, because I think that we overlook that it is a giant industry. And so when we hear of things like funding changes, executive orders, big monumental sort of shifts that could happen in systems, and just like the trickle down effect of that, I think we're the fourth largest sector in the country. And that's a big implication.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that any of us have a magic 8-ball and can like figure out what the implication of this administration is going to be in the sector. But when you just look at the future of fundraising, and you look at that sort of job trajectory. So what do you think is next for you, for your fundraising journey? Where do you think we're headed?
That's a two-part question, because when you say what I think is next for me.
Well, let's talk about the profession first. What is the future of the profession, do you think?
Well, I did. So I had this plan, and I focused on wanting to address the numbers of fundraisers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because the Bureau of Labor Statistics, maybe 7 years ago, I know it was pre-pandemic, a few years pre-pandemic, predicted that fundraising was at that time, fundraisers was the fastest growing profession.
Wow.
And that was, I had the report right in front of me. I don't have it now, but that was, at that time. And one of the big reasons was because so many of us are retiring and so many are going into consulting, and frankly, folks are dying, so there's this gap. And I had done a survey maybe a few years before that of our membership, and our membership at the time was probably around 3,000. And I don't remember the percentage of the people that responded, but the people who responded were, and I don't know, I don't have all of the gens correctly. Okay. I know I'm a boomer. My daughter reminds me that every day. She doesn't even call me mom. She says, "Hey, boomer, how you doing?" And I'm like, it's not cute to be a millennial anymore. There was a time it's not, your day is over. No, but, so the people at that time who responded to the survey, who were finding the career of a fundraiser something that they wanted to pursue, they were, getting degrees and certificates and all kinds of things, were between the age of like 22 and 32.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was this gap of people who didn't respond, like in the 30s at the time, mid 30s, up to like 40, that didn't respond to the survey, just a trickle. And then there was, a larger number of people. So there's this gap, is the point that, and I was like, what is happening to this gap? Because we don't need the Nubians. They're too young to really take over the profession. And the older folks are planning their, escape, right?
Right.
How much longer, And so I started, to talk to people and interview people and find out what was going on. And this won't come as a surprise to you. But I started discovering that there's this, group of people who weren't sure if they wanted to stay in fundraising. It wasn't, they were like, I don't know. For me, I fell in it. I'm like, I'm in it for life. And I stayed at one place for 25 years. That's a boomer thing. We're loyal. We don't go, whatever. And there's this group of young people who are like, I might go to the for-profit side because I don't know if I want the struggle. But then there were others that were saying, I'm passionate, the fundraising. I love raising money for what I'm passionate about, XYZ, right? But I'm not being paid enough, And then was discovering that they wanted titles. That was a big thing that we started dealing with was, I want the salary, but I want the AVP. I want the senior. So-and-so. So many positions were director of development. And you could go from one organization making $50,000 and be a director of development and go to another and make $180,000 and still be a director of development.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, we were dealing with that a lot. So now here we are in this place, where the people who were, on this journey, most of us fell into fundraising accidentally, are saying, I'm tapped out. I'm tired. I'm going to retire. I'm going to, go into consulting, which can I just say, what's funny is I have 28-year-olds telling me, consulting, Shingle. It's like, honey, you don't know enough to advise anybody on this. You just learned 5 minutes ago. And I say this publicly, And I forgot what the question was. See what I said? You should have turned the hourglass over on me. What was the question?
You
What does the
answered
future look
it.
like?
No, yeah.
Okay.
The future of the profession. I think I would agree. You're right. We see a lot of folks that are, especially during the pandemic, right? Like how do you be responsive to the fact that you have to shift everything in all the ways that you've been doing it before? We saw a lot of early retirement, leaving the sector entirely, going to the for-profit sector. And we do see an influx of a lot of new people in the sector, a lot of young people, which is amazing. I'm excited about young people leading. And I think that the fundraising world is one where if you're not connecting to others doing the work, sometimes I think you might have a narrative for yourself that you fell into it and you're the only one. And yet I think that is the case often. And so I love the work that you all are doing at AADO. I think it's so important to have that connection and sense of belonging.
Well, the connection really helps people to, have those conversations and understand what it is that they can do or they can contribute, that's satisfying to them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I had a lovely conversation with someone a few weeks ago who left the for-profit, sector and moved into nonprofit. And she is happy as, I'll get out. I mean, she landed. And so I said, we need to do a power hour discussion with you because I always have people ask about, and I know some who moved the other side, who are who are doing awarding grants, and they thought, oh, that's going to be an easy job. And they found out it's not easy at all. But to learn what they tapped into in their experience, in their talents, to be able to, move into a job that wasn't a career for them. This person was in sales in the corporate world. And she found the way that she found, to kind of tap into those talents is not what you would expect. You know what I mean? You think, oh, yeah, sales, it can overlap directly into fundraising.
Yeah.
No, the things that she learned to, turn that into a career for her, people could really benefit from hearing from her and learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so what's the other side of that coin then? What about you, your future? What's next for your fundraising journey?
So I am going to leave fundraising and I'm going back into the theater.
Yes. Amazing. Back to the roots.
Back into the theater. Listen, there are parts, for old people. So, I'm working on getting healthy, losing the weight. I studied voice for 8 years, classical voice for 8 years. I was never a triple threat. I could always sing. I could always act. I could not dance. And so that's something I'm like, you know what? I think that I'm not going to go out of the world not being a triple threat. I'm going to, focus on the dancing. One of the, biggest roles I got was in Guys and Dolls. I actually played Sarah Brown and, I had to go through the dance audition and I was horrible. I was about 18, 19 at the time. And, they did the routine. It was very slow when they were doing the routine. And then they brought us up in groups of 3 or 4 and put the music on. And it was Earth, Wind, and Fire, Serpentine Fire. And, folks were going, and I was running into people. And they pulled me aside. I could sing, the part perfectly and it could act. The only dancing that she has to do is when he takes her to Havana and gets her drunk. And they're like, your dancing is perfect.
That's awesome.
So I'm going to go back into the theater.
I love that.
Birgit, I love that you're following your passion. I love that you're returning to your roots. I also love that perhaps we might find out one day that we can see you off Broadway.
I know. I love that story.
We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to jump into the fundraising elevator and get a little wisdom for our friends out there. So we'll be right back. We've been partnering with Greater Giving for over 20 years as our go-to event auction software. Greater Giving allows us to do our job planning fundraising events even better because we can manage guest lists, seating, bid number assignments, and sales all in one place.
That makes it great for our nonprofit partners and their guests. Check out Greater Giving for your next event at greatergiving.com. Link in the show notes.
Welcome back. We are here with triple threat?
Aspirationally.
I'm just going to go with triple threat. Birgit, we are getting in the fundraising elevator where we are all headed up. We ask all of our guests to step in this elevator to offer that bit of sage advice that as the door's closing, here's the one thing I really need you to remember so our fundraisers can continue heading up.
Yes.
Birgit, what do you got for our folks out there?
All right. So, I was thinking about that and I thought, one of the things that we should know and know within our hearts is that we're always going to be faced with change and challenges and choices. Mm-hmm. And so what's most important that we do is we lift as we climb, right? And that success in fundraising isn't just about raising dollars. It's about raising people and investing in relationships, not just transactions. And so seek mentorship, but also seek to be a mentor to someone else. Give, take. It makes it so much more of a community of folks supporting one another. Stay curious. And I tell people all the time, committed to learning, right? And that's hard for me because, like I said, I'm a boomer, so, there are things I'm like, no, I don't want to know, and I'm like, but I need to know. So let me lean into learning. The landscape of philanthropy is always evolving. And the best fundraisers are those who embrace change, ask thoughtful questions, and never stop growing.
Good wisdom.
Drop. I love that.
I know.
Well, you certainly have brought others up in your profession, in your career. And there's a couple things coming up I want to make sure folks know about. So the AFP conference is actually, this episode releases the day or the week before the conference starts. So it's this coming weekend in Seattle.
Yeah.
Are you going to be there, Birgit?
Of course.
Oh, excellent.
Right.
So
I'm the immediate past chair. I still have responsibilities.
Okay. I love that story.
Well, I look forward to seeing you there. I hope other folks will seek out Birgit and pick up a little wisdom along the way. Also, I want to make sure that to our fundraisers of color out there that you look into the AADO conference in September in Atlanta. I've heard from many other folks who have attended that it's really an experience worth having because of that importance of belonging in community. So thank you for investing your energy in that. I think it's important. And we'll put links to all these in the show notes so folks know how to get a hold of them. Birgit, thank you for joining us today. We look forward to your journey to Broadway and seeing your name in lights.
Well, thank you for putting that out in the universe. I appreciate that. And thank you for inviting me here today. I'm glad to have been able to share a little bit about what makes me tick and what brings me joy.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Love it. Thanks so much.
The Fundraising Elevator is produced in partnership with Swaim Strategies at the studios of the AV Department. The program is produced and directed by Steve Osborne, with audio engineering and original music by Dwayne Anderson, Heidi Christensen, and Adam Breeden. Video production by Shannon Doran. Graphic design by Pendulum Creative Group. Marketing by Lisa Aragon. Support from Mary Elizabeth, Todd Campbell, John Lyles, and Andy Dowsett. And voiceover by Josh Boykin.
Friends, before we leave you, we want to ask for your help to make the podcast grow. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please follow, subscribe to the Fundraising Elevator. And if you're getting a lot out of the show, please share it with a friend and leave a review. These things help make sure that the podcast continues heading up. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Are you ready to engage supporters and grow your base with your own podcast? Then let us introduce you to our partners at the AV Department in Portland, Oregon. In addition to delivering exceptional live event audiovisual production and videography, they also have a top-tier production studio and an expert team ready to take your content ideas to the next level. Contact the AV Department to schedule a consultation and start bringing your podcast vision to life.